Okay, so once you got your stop motion images on your computer, they should look something like this. This is now called an image sequence. It's a bunch of images that you want to turn into a video. So if I have a look by just tapping spacebar on a Mac, I could press down and see that, oh yeah, I'm just going through these. You can see me pressing up and down does this. So I'm just pressing down and seeing like, oh yeah, there is some motion and stuff. It's all working pretty well. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use Adobe Premiere Pro to compile them into a video. Now the way you do this is you go into your Mac.hd applications. Hopefully you know how to open up Adobe Premiere Pro by now. And just double click on that and I give it a little bit of a second. Okay, so Premiere Pro is open now. I'm going to just create a new project. This project I'm going to call it Stop Motion. I'm going to choose where I want it to go by clicking Browse and tell it to go to the desktop. So ideally you'd create a folder. If you haven't done one already, you can click on this little button and create one. And what this is for is to have a home for all of your images and all your video files and all your audio files and everything like that. So I'm just going to click on that and choose, and click on OK. So when you want to bring your images into Premiere Pro, you have two options. One is to bring in your images just like this, so image 1, image 2, image 3, etc. And the other option is to bring them in as an image sequence. An image sequence is saying all of these photos is one video file. And then Premiere just sees it as one video file, and you can edit it just like any other video file. Now, there are benefits for both of them. The benefit of bringing them in as individual images are it's easier to edit individual images when you're inside of Premiere, and it's easier to bring it inside of Premiere to import it. You can just drag and drop all those images in. The negatives is that it's a little bit harder to edit the entire piece. So if you want all the images to go a little bit higher, all the images to be a little bit lower, that kind of thing, then you will need to copy paste lots of attributes and things like that. Now the benefits of bringing it in as an image sequence though is you can make big edits really easily. You can cut the beginnings, you can cut the ends really easily, you can move the entire thing up and down and scale it up and down, and you don't need to worry about each individual image being separate. Now the con of it is it does take a few seconds to bring in, and it also can be a little bit annoying to edit lots of tiny little images. But let's see what that looks like. So first I'll show you how to import it as an image sequence. Now in order to import an image sequence, your photos need to be numbered correctly. So it should be image 1, image 2, image 3, image 4, etc. Now it's okay if these numbers aren't starting from 1, so if it's image 520, 521, 522, that's fine as well. But the photos need to be consecutive in order, so you can't have missing numbers, so you can't go 1, 2, 7, 8, etc. So make sure they're all consecutive. I'm going to show you how to bring in an image sequence into Premiere first. Now if you have some missing numbers, so it's going 1, 2, 7, 8, 14, 15, and there's no like complete numerical order into it, what you can do is use Adobe Bridge and select all of your images and go to Tools, Batch Rename, and you can rename multiple files at the same time. You just say create a new sequence number and start from 1, and it will just zero out all these numbers. So that's a really handy tool to know about. Okay, so to import them now, you go to, in Premiere Pro, you go to File, Import, and then you choose the very first photo of your sequence. You don't need to choose them all. And now you click on this options thing just to make sure this image sequence is selected. I think by default it's on. And then you click on Import. And that has now imported my image sequence. Now you'll notice it's imported it at the frame rate of 25 frames per second. You need to choose what kind of frame rate you want. So I might right click this, go modify interpret footage, and say actually I want you to use the frame rate of, let's say, 15 frames a second. And click on OK. Now 15 frames a second is a standard for stop motion because it's half of 30 frames a second, which is NTSC. You can also choose 12 frames a second if you want to have film, but I think 15 frames a second works pretty well. So I'm going to click it and drag it in here, and what this does is it creates a sequence of the same size and same frames per second. Now, an interesting thing about a sequence is normally that works fine, but you'll see that over here my resolution is quite high. This is a very, very large resolution. Now I personally would rather it be full HD instead of this weird number, because when you take stills with a camera, it's usually a different resolution to video resolutions. So I'm going to just right click this, go sequence settings. I right clicked my sequence settings, and I'm going to choose the resolution, which is 1920 by 1080, which is full HD. Now if you want, you could try to do 4K, that's absolutely fine, and click OK. And let's move this back. Okie dokie. So now if I press play, you'll see that, hey, it's a video. I do know that the rotation is off and also the size is off. So I'll need to select it and I will need to rotate it, I think, minus 90 degrees. Nope, I was wrong, 90 degrees. There we go. And I need to scale it down. Depending on your camera, it's going to be a different number. And you could also use the position up here. Now, if you don't have this window open, just make sure you're in your effects tab, or if you're in editing, let's see, you can make sure you're just in effects controls. Let's move this a little bit to the side. Let's scale it up a little bit, 65, 67. And there we go, that looks fine. Okay, I'm pressing plus and minus on my keyboard to zoom in and zoom out. And I'll give this a little trim. Go over here. The way I trim, by the way, is you can click and drag the edges, or you could press W or Q, which will trim. But the easiest way is to click and drag an edge like this. And if you cut an edge, you can click and drag and bring it back as well, so it's not permanent. And you can see my stop motion is kind of doing its thing. Nice. You can see the board movement. I accidentally moved the board around here, so I'm going to have to fix this up. So the way I would do this is I would put a cut here, and I would just rotate this and scale it to make it fit as best as I can. Now if you want to get rid of an image, like this one for instance, you could zoom in by pressing plus and minus and use the blade tool, and you could put in a little cut and then another little cut. Press V to get to the arrow tool, or just, this is the arrow tool over here. You can click on delete that and then maybe close the gap by doing this. Now you could go in and do that for several frames that screw up. And if you need to do an effect to multiple frames, I'll show you how to do that in the next step. So this is how you treat your stop motion as one big video file. However, I'll show you now how to import it as a still images. So if you want to import it as still images, you can probably click and drag, but I think I'll just go File, Import. And instead of selecting one of them and choosing image sequence, I'm going to select all of them by hitting Command A, and then it automatically turns that off, and then I could choose Import. And that's going to import all the hundreds of images. Now they're already selected, and they're not in a folder, so I don't want to deselect them right now. I'm going to actually click and drag them into a folder like so. Now they're in a folder. I could call this footage. That's not how you spell it. Boom. And now that I've got this folder, it's going to be a little bit easier to work with. So almost the exact same thing. I'm just going to click and drag it into here. And now I've got the same problem, whereas this is 25 frames a second, and the resolution's also off. So I'm going to change the frame rate of the sequence itself and the resolution. So I'm going to right click, sequence settings. Now here's where I choose the frame rate. Again, I might stick with 15 frames a second. I think that's fine. And over here, I will choose 1920 by 1080 and hit OK. Yep, that's just saying it's going to crop it. That's fine. Okay, now if I press play, you're going to notice that it's very, very slow. Now, the reason this is doing that is because when I imported these images, by default, Premiere will take each image as 5 seconds or something large like that. And we actually want it to be a lot quicker than that. Now, if you're going to be importing a lot of these image sequences, you might want to change the preferences to make it not 5 seconds. The way you do that is you go to Premiere Pro, Preferences, Timeline, I believe the option is. Yep, in Timeline, and then Still Image Default Duration, you would change this to not 1 second, but 1 frame. So you'd go frames, you'd say it's 1 frame long. Or if you want to go on 2s, you'd go 2 frames long, but 1 frame long is probably the best way to do it if your sequence is going to be 15 frames a second. And hit OK. Now that didn't actually change anything. You would need to re-import them. So I'll show you how to fix it if you already imported it and you don't want to have to deal with re-importing or changing your settings at all. All you need to do is select it, right-click, and choose Speed/Duration, and tell each frame to be 1 frame. And hit OK. There we go. Now it looks like everything disappeared, but what's actually happening is it just didn't fill in the gaps. So if I zoom in by pressing plus on the keyboard, you'll see that there's lots of these little 1 frames, and they all used to be this large, and then they all got trimmed to that small. Now let's undo that. Now there's a whole bunch of gaps here. So what we can do is we could just select all of them by just clicking and dragging all of them when you're zoomed out, and then go Sequence and choose Close Gap. And now you'll see that all those little gray bits went there. If I zoom in by pressing plus on the keyboard, you'll see that there they are. So if I press play, there's my stop motion. So I'll show you that again. You could just click on this thing, open up those images, forget all the images, and shift select the first one and then shift select the last one so it selects them all. Click and drag. Now they're all here. I could select all of these by going Command A or Edit, Select All, and then I can right click, choose Speed/Duration, and make the duration just 1 and hit Okie dokie. And now of course there's all these gaps, so we need to select them all, Command A or Control A, and then Sequence and Close Gap. So now it closes all the gaps. I can press plus on my keyboard to zoom in. There we go. Hey, it's looking good. Okay, now we can see a lot of shots where my hand is in shot. So that's the benefit of bringing them in as images. I could just select that one and just hit delete. And I could select this gap and hit delete as well. And you can go through it and find any issues. But it's kind of hard to see the issues because the size is all wrong. So I need to fix up the size. Now to fix up the size, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select one of them. And I'm going to edit the size. So scale down to something like, I think it was 67 last time. And rotation was 90. And I'll move it over here to the side. Something like that looks good. Maybe a little bit higher. Something like this looks fine. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy paste the attributes. So I can select the clip that's changed and go copy. So Command C, or you can go edit copy. And then you want to select all, so again Command A, and then you want to paste the attributes. So right click, paste attributes. And this is going to paste all the attributes that you choose. You just want to make sure motion is selected. That's the one that has all the rotation, scale, and position. And click OK. And now all of them should have that same scale. So if I press play, you can watch your animation. Now, I'm noticing there's some issues with over here, my hands in shot, for instance. I could select that, hit delete, and get rid of that. And I can start deleting all the ones that I don't like. So all of these beginning ones weren't good, so I'm going to select them, hit delete, delete that gap. There we go. That's looking good, looking good, looking good. There we go, and it ends. Now, the issue I have here is I've got the board rotates like this because I accidentally moved the board. So what I'm going to do is the same thing. I'm going to rotate one of these and try to match the other one. Now, I could just try to eyeball it and just rotate this now, but I think it would be easier if I actually brought in one of these images on top. on top like this, and brought down the opacity a little bit so I can kind of see through it. And now I could try to rotate it or scale it or whatever to match the other one. So I'm going to rotate it a little bit this way. Let's try 89 degrees, so just 1 degree difference, and just move it. And I'm probably going to be trying to do it near the middle. So I'm looking at Egypt over here. And that worked okay, but the Western United States over here is a little bit off, so I might change it now to 90 again? Oh, actually, yeah, just the rotation wasn't really an issue. The movement was the issue. So that's starting to look pretty good. You could turn it on and off by just clicking like this, just dragging that opacity, and it's not great, but that's possibly the best I can get it. I'm going to try moving it up and down a little bit more. And that's probably as best as I'll get it right now. And I'll put this back where it belongs, and I'll bring back the opacity to 100%. Could even delete. And now that I've fixed this frame, I'll need to fix all of these ones before it. If I change this frame over here, then I'd change all the ones after it. So this one, I'm going to copy it. And now, of course, you probably won't have this issue, but if you do, this is how you would fix it. Right click, paste attributes, and okie dokie. Now it's not perfect, but it got a lot of that camera shake fixed. Okay, and now to export, it's really simple. You just go File, Export Media. And you click on here if you want to tell it where to go. This is where it's going currently. And you can choose the quality over here. So match source high bitrate is going to give you high quality, medium quality, etc. Just make sure H.264 is selected if you want this to be your final result. If you want to take it into another editing program, then you would choose something like ProRes. But if you're just exporting it to submit it or to keep it as your final output, then H.264 is fantastic. So if you want, you could change the bitrate by going high bitrate, medium bitrate, or even play around with some lower ones. High bitrate is going to give me a 7 megabyte file, so that's pretty good for me, so I'm just going to leave it as that. And I'll click export. And that's how you edit your stop motion.